All right, so we're diving deep today into Atalanta
Yeah.
after their match against Fiorentina, Serie A action this past weekend.
And big match.
And they unfortunately lost this one. And we've got some really interesting audio to unpack here.
You do.
So you sent over some post-match thoughts from the coach, Gian Piero Gasperini, as well as the midfielder, Marco Brescianini.
Right.
And then also the full press conference after the game.
The full thing, yeah.
So, our mission today is to kind of cut through the immediate disappointment of the result and try to figure out what really went wrong over in Florence.
Yeah.
Try to get a sense of, what the team's thinking now.
Right.
And ultimately figure out what this all means for Atalanta going forward as they face some huge home matches coming up here.
Yeah, I think what makes this so fascinating is that we're going beyond just the typical match report. We've got Gasperini giving his strategic perspective. We've got Bresciani, a player on the pitch, actually giving his view of what happened. Yeah. And then this press conference, which gives us so much more context with all those different questions, and Gasperini, having to answer in detail about what happened. Yeah. It's really comprehensive.
Yeah, and for you, the learner out there listening to this, we're going to try to cut through it all and give you a really clear and efficient understanding of exactly what happened, the specific challenges that Atalanta is facing now, and, what this all means in the bigger picture.
Absolutely.
As they head into, these final matches of the season.
It's like a stretch.
We're going to extract those key insights and offer some analysis so you can really grasp the situation quickly without feeling overwhelmed by all the details.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
I mean, the first takeaway right off the bat is that everyone's disappointed.
Oh, yeah.
About this loss.
Yeah. Big time.
Both Brescianini and Gasperini.
Yeah.
They don't mince words about it.
No, they don't.
Like, they're very clear.
Brescianini uses the word peccato.
Okay.
Which, it means like a shame or a pity.
Yeah.
And right away, he talks about how difficult the pitch was to play on.
Yeah.
And for him, it's clear, like, the main problem was they just didn't score a goal.
Right. And Gasperini kind of echoes that same sentiment.
He does.
He says, it was a challenging match, especially the second half.
Yeah.
But he really focuses on a specific turning point.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
He calls out that goal that Fiorentina scored at the end of the first half.
Right.
He calls it a fluky goal, and he feels like that one moment just totally changed the momentum of the entire match.
Absolutely.
And really just sapped their energy.
Psychologically, those late goals can be so deflating.
And it's so interesting, right, how, like, psychologically impactful those kinds of late goals can be, right?
Totally. It just, like, sucks the energy out of you.
It's almost like, you can see it happen on the pitch.
Yeah, you can feel it.
Even if you're just watching on TV, right? Like, it's almost like a visible shift.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned this earlier.
Yeah.
The stats from the press conference really kind of back that up.
Yeah, this is what's crazy.
And show how unusual this performance was from Atalanta. Particularly in attack.
Yeah, so in their previous 4 away matches, they had scored 16 goals.
Oh.
And only conceded 1.
Okay, so like a
goal machine.
Yeah.
And then you look at this Fiorentina game, 0 shots on target.
Wow.
That is a huge drop-off.
Yeah, that's a massive difference.
It's like a completely different team almost.
So let's move beyond just the result, right?
Okay.
And try to figure out, like, what our sources tell us about what really caused this performance, what went wrong, both tactically and physically.
Yeah.
Gasperini talks about this quite a bit.
He does.
So what does he say?
Well, he says that the team just lacked pace, dynamism, and energy in that second half.
Yeah.
And that obviously makes it incredibly difficult to make a comeback.
Yeah.
Now, thinking about why that might be the case, beyond just, having a bad day.
Right.
You have to think that maybe the fatigue from the international break played a role.
Yeah.
Guys traveling all over the place.
Right.
Maybe they weren't in peak condition.
Right.
It's also possible that Fiorentina adjusted their tactics in the second half.
Yeah.
Maybe they sat back a bit more defensively.
Yeah.
Which would have denied Atalanta those open spaces they usually love to exploit.
Yeah, and that would make sense.
Yeah.
Given what we know about Atalanta and how they like to play. And it sounds like, Gasperini's starting lineup was kind of a calculated risk.
It was.
He mentions starting Lookman and Retegui.
Right.
Even though Retegui was coming back from an injury.
Yeah, he was just coming back from an injury layoff.
And Lookman had a late return from international duty.
Yep. Flew back in late.
So what was Gasperini's thinking there?
Well, he says he felt like that pairing gave them the best chance.
Okay.
Especially in that first half.
Okay.
He thought that it would be a really dynamic first half.
Yeah.
And that those two guys would be key.
Mm.
But he does admit that the impact just wasn't there.
Okay.
You know, they lacked their usual attacking spark.
Yeah.
Especially once Fiorentina tightened up at the back.
Right. Yeah. And, it's interesting. Bresciani's perspective as a player on the pitch really supports that idea.
It does.
He talks about how the lack of open space in the second half really limited their ability to counterattack, which we know is such a huge part.
Yeah, that's their bread and butter.
Yeah, it's like their signature style, right?
Exactly.
So it sounds like Fiorentina just did a good job defensively.
Yeah, they executed their plan well.
Of shutting down Atalanta. And Gasperini also points out that they struggled to create chances on the wings.
He does.
Despite, that early combination play between Zappacosta and Lookman.
Right.
So what do you think that tells us?
Well, it could mean that Fiorentina's fullbacks were just super disciplined.
Okay.
Or maybe it suggests that Atalanta's tactical setup just wasn't right.
Yeah.
For utilizing the flanks.
Okay, so a disappointing loss.
Yeah.
A lack of that usual attacking threat. And the potential lingering effects of the international break.
Right.
These all seem to be, pretty key factors.
Yeah, big factors.
Now let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
And talk about what this result means for Atalanta's ambitions for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Gasperini is pretty definitive when he talks about the scudetto dream.
Yeah, he doesn't beat around the bush.
What does he have?
He says straight up that the scudetto dream is over.
Okay.
Done, officially finished.
Wow.
He thinks it realistically ended after that match against Inter.
Oh, so that's
It's a very pragmatic assessment.
Yeah, it's a very, clear-eyed and honest assessment of the situation. Yeah.
No sugarcoating it.
So, with the league title seemingly out of reach now, the focus shifts to securing that Champions League spot.
Absolutely.
And both Gasperini and Bresciani, they really emphasize the importance of looking ahead.
Yeah.
Bresciani even calls the remaining 8 games finals.
He does 8 finals.
Which I think really underscores how seriously they're taking this.
Yeah, that shows you the urgency, the level of importance they're putting on these last few games.
And they both highlighted those upcoming home games.
Yes, those are massive.
Against Lazio and Bologna.
Huge.
Right, these are direct rivals for those Champions League places.
Absolutely.
So those matches are absolutely massive.
Yeah, they're crucial.
They're huge opportunities to get some points on the board.
Especially at home.
Especially at home.
Yeah.
Now, Gasperini did acknowledge
that
their home form hasn't been as strong as they would have liked this season.
He did.
Which adds another layer of pressure, I think, to these upcoming fixtures.
Yeah, because you'd expect them to be strong at home.
Right. And they haven't really been consistently. So that's definitely something to watch.
Yep.
Now, it's important to remember
that
even with these recent losses to Inter and Fiorentina, Gasperini reminds us that they're still in 3rd place.
That's right.
In the table.
Yeah, they're in a privileged position, as he put it.
Yeah. And I think that speaks volumes.
It does.
About their overall performance and their consistency.
Throughout the season,
For the majority of this season.
Yeah.
So, it's easy to focus on the negative.
It is.
With these 2 losses.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember.
Yeah.
They've had a good season overall.
Yeah.
And Gasperini really stresses the need
he does.
For strong motivation and a positive environment within the squad.
Exactly.
To achieve what would be another fantastic milestone.
Absolutely.
For Atalanta.
The other Champions League qualification.
Yeah, to secure that Champions League qualification.
Would be huge for them.
Yeah.
Especially after kind of, falling short of the scudetto. So, yeah, really need to refocus.
Okay, so let's switch gears again a little bit.
Okay.
Talk about the team's composition.
All right.
We know that Atalanta has been dealing with some injuries this season.
Yeah, they've had their fair share.
What did Gasperini have to say about that?
So he addressed the long-term absences of Scalvini, Scamacca, and Palomino, who he actually refers to as Cosono at one point, which is his nickname.
So I guess that shows a little bit of familiarity there.
Yeah, a bit of closeness.
Yeah.
But yeah, he basically says these guys have been out for a while.
Right, so no new injuries then from this match?
No, not really.
Okay.
It's just these long-term ones that have been lingering.
Okay.
But there was some good news about Palomino.
Oh, okay. What's that?
Yeah, he mentioned that Palomino might be back soon.
Okay.
Maybe even before that Bologna match.
Okay. So that's good news for Atalanta fans.
Definitely.
So currently, the main guys that are out are Toloi and then potentially Palomino.
Right.
Depending on how his recovery goes.
Exactly.
So it sounds like while they've had their challenges with injuries, Gasperini doesn't seem to be using that as an excuse.
No, he doesn't.
For this particular match.
He kind of sees this Fiorentina game as more of like an anomaly.
Okay.
In terms of their attack.
Yeah.
Not so much because of injuries. It's more like a tactical thing.
Gotcha.
Like they just weren't able to create as many chances as they usually do.
Now, there was a bit of talk in the press conference.
Oh, yeah.
About Gasperini's own future at the club. There have been some rumors.
Yeah, linking him with Roma.
Linking him to other teams like Roma.
Yeah.
How did he respond to those questions?
Well, he did what any experienced coach would do.
Okay.
He deflected.
Okay.
He didn't give any direct answers.
So,
No, I'm staying or I'm going. He just kept emphasizing that his focus is on Atalanta and finishing the season strong.
Okay.
You know, he kept bringing the conversation back to the team and their strong position in the league.
Yeah.
Despite these recent setbacks.
Yeah, so he's not letting any of that outside noise distract him.
Not at all.
What about his thoughts on the officiating during the match?
That's interesting.
Were there any complaints there?
Surprisingly, no.
Really?
He described it as normal administration.
Okay.
Basically, no major issues.
Wow, so he's not blaming the refs?
No, not really.
Okay.
He did mention a VAR check for a potential handball.
Okay.
But that was about it.
So it sounds like he feels like the officiating wasn't a factor.
Yeah, pretty much.
In the outcome.
Yeah.
And he also defended his decision.
He did.
To start Lookman and Retegui.
Yeah.
Even though, they had those
with the
travel issues
and
all the injury concern.
Yep.
He said he felt it was the right approach for the type of game they were expecting.
Yeah, for the game they wanted to play.
He knew there were risks involved.
Of course.
Especially with Retegui's fitness.
Yeah, he might not have been able to last the whole 90 minutes.
Right.
But Gasperini felt like they needed Lookman's creativity and his energy in that attacking setup.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it didn't work out as planned.
Right.
But he doesn't seem to regret the decision.
Okay.
He stands by it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so last but not least, let's talk about the atmosphere within the team. After this result, Brescianini was one of the few players who stayed in Bergamo.
During the break.
During the international break.
Yep.
What did he say about the mood?
He said everyone's still working hard.
Okay.
And there's no sense of panic.
Okay, good.
Yeah. They're not demoralized.
Okay.
They're confident in their abilities.
Yeah.
And they're determined to show what they can do in these remaining matches. So they're putting this loss behind them and staying focused.
Okay, so just to summarize for you, the learner out there, we've gone deep into Atalanta's defeat against Fiorentina.
Yep.
We've looked at the possible reasons behind the loss.
Yeah.
We've heard directly from the coach and a key player.
Right.
And we've gotten a sense of their mindset as they head into this crucial final stretch of the season.
Yeah, the final stretch.
Those upcoming home games against Lazio and Bologna are going to be absolutely pivotal for them.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how they're acknowledging that the scudetto dream is over.
It is.
But they're still resilient despite these ongoing injury concerns.
They're not making excuses.
And I think it gives us a lot of context for their current priorities.
Absolutely. They're laser focused on those Champions League places.
Exactly.
They're facing challenges. But as Gasperini said, they're still in a really strong position.
Yeah.
It all comes down to how they respond and how they perform in these next few matches.
And that brings us to our final thought for you to consider.
Okay, hit me.
Gasperini really hammered home the importance of their home form.
He did.
In these remaining matches.
Yeah.
But we know that their home record hasn't been great this season.
Not consistently, no.
So what do you think Atalanta needs to do to really turn things around at home? Do they need to make some tactical changes?
Maybe.
Do they need to adjust their mentality
Could be.
when playing at home?
Right.
Or is it something else entirely?
Interesting question.
It's something to think about as we watch the rest of their season unfold.
It'll be fascinating to see how they respond.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Yeah, this was great.
We'll see you next time.
Catch you later.